My belongings will be delivered to your house next week. Accept them all, okay? You are so clumsy and inconsiderate. I'm moving in to re-educate you on how to be the proper wife. The least you can do is to give me my own room, even if you have to move your things out. My mother-in-law gives me the news out of the blue. Moving? Re-education? What on earth is she talking about? My husband has never mentioned that she was moving in with us. Anyway, who does she think she is talking about re-education? She doesn't care about my feelings and really moves in the week after. When she sees her son in the house, she screams like Munch. This is when she comes to know who really needs to be re-educated. She also realizes that there is no house for her to live in, because my real home is. I was a working wife who had been married for 3 years. I met my husband Marcus through a friend, and we hit it off right away. After 2 years of dating, we got married. We were both working. We've lived alone before, so both of us were capable of doing a full range of housework. After we got married, we decided that whoever noticed it or had free time would take care of it. This policy seemed to suit us better than a clear division of chores. We never had any dispute over them. When my work became busier, Marcus' share of the workload increased a little at home. Even though it was a rule that we had decided upon together, I felt a little bad about it. I made up for it by buying him nice dessert and treating him to a meal on weekends. I felt like I was bribing him with food, but he always said, "I'm happy to do it this way, rather than overwhelming you at home." I was reassured that I married a really good guy. I prayed that those happy days would last forever. Just as I was hoping, my father-in-law passed away. He had married late, so he was already quite old. It was sad, but Marcus accepted it as inevitable to a certain extent. For my mother-in-law Louise, who had been with him for many years, it was not that easy. She must have felt so lonely after the sudden loss of her husband that she struggled to be alone and began to visit us frequently. On weekdays, she came over after we got home from work. On weekends, she sometimes showed up in the morning. To be honest, it was a little hard for me to entertain her from the morning on my days off. Although I was quite tired from work, I couldn't neglect a grieving mother-in-law. I was determined to help her heal and recover as much as possible. As she continued to rely on us, I noticed that the reason for her visit had somehow changed. In the beginning, we just chit-chatted over meals and drinks. We talked about the news, my work, how I was getting along with Marcus, etc., etc. I was not sure if it was appropriate to mention my father-in-law, but sometimes the conversation unexpectedly turned to him. She sometimes shed tears, and I quietly stayed beside her. However, she started focusing more and more on me as a wife. Getting unwanted advice would have been better than the criticism. The inside of the refrigerator was not well organized. Laundry and cleaning were not done properly. There were too many discarded packages of cup noodles and ready-made food in the trash. She asked me if I was trying to destroy my health before I had a baby. I was often criticized like that. It was inevitable that as long as we both worked and shared the chores, there were some sloppy jobs. We were both laid back, so we were never bothered by the details and weren't even thinking about starting a family. I understood what she was trying to say, but if only she got better and stopped coming over so often, I could have tended to my housework more. Of course, I didn't dare to tell her that. "Yes, right, I'm sorry." I had no choice but to nod my head in agreement. One weekend, she came over as usual. She saw Marcus washing the dishes and suddenly started scolding me. "Why is my son washing the dishes? You're the wife. You should be the one doing it." I froze at her outburst. She paid no attention to me and took the plate and sponge from his hands. She then made him sit on the sofa and pulled me to the kitchen. I stood in front of the sink, feeling a little irritated, but trying to talk as calmly as possible. Listen, Louise, we both work, right? That's why we share the housework. It just so happened that he was doing it today. I don't leave everything to him, so... Don't talk back to me! I tried to explain, but she didn't want to listen to me or try to understand. I thought that if Marcus explained it to her, she would have at least tried to understand a little. I glanced at him with hopeful eyes. He nodded as if he understood. I believed that he was going to help me out of the awkward situation. I was relieved for a moment. Then, he blurted out totally unexpected things.
Mom, calm down. It's not good for your health to get so upset. You have a point though. I'm going to make her do the right things from now on. Honey, you should apologize to her.
He looked at me. Why didn't he just tell her that we shared the chores? I thought about saying so, but I felt there was no point in arguing with Louise any further. I will be careful in the future. I apologized and put the matter to rest. I asked Marcus what he was up to after she left. No matter how much I told her about our rule, she wouldn't have listened to me as long as she saw me as a bad wife. If he had told her, she would have listened to him. That would have been all it took to settle the matter. Why did he have to make it worse? He sensed how angry I was and started excusing himself.
I was just trying to smooth things over. I'm sure if I explained about the shared responsibilities, my old-fashioned mom wouldn't have understood. You know I didn't really agree with her, right? She'll eventually understand.
He tried to justify himself, but we knew each other for a long time. I knew that he was bullshitting. In fact, I thought he was hoping that he wouldn't have to do the housework. He had been kind of a trickster ever since we started dating. As I mentioned before, I was easygoing, and he had never caused any serious trouble, so he got away as mischievous. I saw no remorse in him, but more than anything, I was exhausted. I decided to swallow hard and assumed that he wanted to show his mother some dignity. Well, we had been sharing the workload so far. Things would have been back to normal the next day. I had such faint hope. However, since that day, he had started to ignore his share of chores blatantly. We never specified which one of us was in charge of what, but he stopped doing them like he used to. I thought he might have been sulking because I had confronted him about Louise, but that was not the case. He was neglecting our home, so I gave him a warning. Unexpectedly, he responded.
Oh, I'm sorry.
He agreed with me. I thought it was normal to be lazy sometimes. Just when I was telling myself that, Louise showed up unannounced the next day. She had always contacted me beforehand, so it alarmed me. I wondered if there was something wrong with her. I was concerned, but what she told me was completely different. I hear that you still haven't learned your lesson and haven't done any housework. Don't you even want to feed your husband something good? Marcus tells me he hasn't been eating homemade food lately because you don't cook at all. I immediately glared at him. Had he snitched on me that I had warned him? No, it wasn't my fault in the first place, so snitch wasn't the right word. He didn't want to do the chores, so he was trying to make me take all the blame. As a result, she started coming over more often than before, and he stopped doing anything altogether. I even had to take over the things he was supposed to do when he got home before me. If I wasn't so busy at work, I could have handled them with ease, but my work was still hectic. I had to cut down my sleep to get everything done, and was getting physically exhausted. I knew that I was going to collapse if I continued like this, and decided to talk to him again. Unfortunately for me, his work had become busy around that time, and we could not have a proper talk. I thought it was inevitable if it was work, but his schedule was outrageous. It was normal for him to come home well after midnight during the week. On weekends, he worked all day long, and in the worst cases, he stayed overnight at the office, saying the commute was a waste of time. Just the other day, I was thinking of discussing Luis, but then I was worried that he was overworked. When I saw him at home, I asked him if he was okay. He replied without a trace of fatigue.
Yes, I'm fine.
I was relieved to hear that, but I thought he looked too energetic. If he was working that hard, he should have shown a little bit of fatigue in his appearance. I wondered how he had so much stamina. I was truly perplexed. If his company was making him work as much as he did, they might have been violating the fair labor standards. I decided to talk to my colleague. Her family member worked for the same company as him. When I told her about the way Marcus was working, she looked at me puzzled. It is indeed a busy season right now, but I don't think they have to work that hard. It may vary from department to department. Even so, they are very strict about hours nowadays, unlike in the past. In other words, Marcus' hard work was not a complete lie, but it was not completely true either. I had a hunch. He didn't come home from work. I was also busy with mine. Because of my frantic life, I could not keep up with the housework. The house was in a miserable state. I was supposed to get a day off the next day. If I spent the whole day, the house would have been back in order. That was my plan. But then, Luis showed up to my dismay. What in the world happened in this house? The moment I entrust you with the housework, it becomes like this? No wonder my son has been doing it. I have been telling you that we share. I was about to explain again when I realized that there was no point in arguing with her. As I was hesitating, she made a gesture as if she had just thought of something. I'm going back home for today. I just remembered something to do. She headed for the door. I was ready to be scolded, so I felt a bit deflated. If the monster had gone away by itself, I had nothing to complain about though. A few days later, she declared something frightening. Hello. My belongings will be delivered to your house next week. Accept them all, okay? After seeing the house in such a state, I can't just not to do anything. You are so clumsy and inconsiderate. For the sake of my son, I'm going to train you how to be the proper wife. I'm going out of my way to move in with you. The least you can do is to give me my own room, even if you have to move your things out. As soon as I answered the phone, she ranted selfishly. There wasn't even a discussion about her move, but her belongings were already on the way. I was sick and tired of her treating me as a fool. If that was how she wanted to play, I had a plan too. I had been contemplating it for some time and decided to act on it then. The day the package arrived and she was moving in, I received a call from her. I didn't feel like dealing with her, so I kept ignoring the calls. She kept calling again and again without a pause for eternity. I had no choice but to answer the phone and heard her shrieking on the other end. What in the world is going on? Where are you? Who the hell is the woman with my son? It was the first time I had ever heard her lose control of herself, and I couldn't help but laugh at her. What's so funny? She asked, sounded irritated, but there was no other way I could react. I didn't think my plan was going to work out so perfectly. I was not home that day. I told Marcus that I was going to see my parents for a couple of days. I expected that he was going to bring his lover into the house while I was gone. When there was a discrepancy between his busy schedule and the information from my colleague, I asked a private investigator to look into his whereabouts. It turned out that he was having an affair with his younger colleague. On weekdays, he used the company car to drive back to our house with her. On weekends, he was going to hotels near and far from home. He was even getting paid overtime for working after hours to make up for the time he spent cheating on me. There was no way that such a man wasn't going to have the woman over while I was away. He was probably planning to have his way at home until he was drained out. But Louise and the movers arrived. I wanted to reveal the debauched and sinful son to her. That was my plan. I told her all of that. She was in total shock. I could only hear her making gasping sounds. It was a pity that I couldn't see what kind of face she was making. By the way, I was not with my parents. I was actually visiting a realtor to sign a contract for a new house and cancel the lease of my current one. I was in the middle of it when I got a call from her, and my realtor was patiently waiting for me to finish. Listen, Louise, I'm busy canceling the lease for my house and stuff, so I will cut to the chase. You made a fool of me and told me that I needed to be trained. Do you realize who really needs it now? And you insinuate that woman do the housework. Who do you think pays the rent of that house? Me. He shared the housework because I was busier and made more money than him. Oh, but he's busy shaking his hips for another woman now, right? Well, I can care less. As for divorce and alimony, my attorney will contact him at a later date. Don't get in touch with me ever again. I was about to hang up the phone and heard her sobbing and pleading with me. I just terminated my lease on my old house. Where am I supposed to go if this house is no more? She had been enjoying picking on me, yet she relied on me when inconvenienced. It's none of my business. Talk to your idiot son. I hung up the phone for real. A few days later, I filed for divorce and 100,000 alimony was being negotiated. I didn't doubt my excellent attorney. Marcus, of course, was dismissed from his job along with his lover because of the incident. I heard through my attorney that he was dumped by her, who told him that she should not have gotten involved. I would have loved to see the two idiots get together and lead a miserable life, but I erased such a wicked thought immediately. Instead, I was told an interesting story. There was still one mystery left. How did Marcus keep up with both busy work and affairs without any sign of exhaustion? One factor could have been that he was enjoying the affair so much that adrenaline helped him. The biggest factor was simply that he was using a lot of over-the-counter energy boosters. As a result, he developed some internal organ problems as a side effect of the drugs, and he could no longer work as much as he used to. Excessive consumption of substances is always a bad idea. The lease of the previous house is terminated as declared. Marcus and Louise don't have the means to keep living there. I don't know where or how they are currently living, or even if they are still alive. They don't matter to me anymore. I am more excited about my new life of freedom.